I'm John Weber for AM Best TV. I'm speaking today to Brian Behlendorf, Chief Strategist for AI and Cyber for the Linux Foundation, and a technologist and self-described nerd diplomat who has dedicated his career to connecting and empowering the free software and open source community to solve hard technology problems. Brian, so glad you could speak with us today.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
So, Brian, you're at the International Insurance Society's Global Insurance Forum, and you're taking part in a panel discussion titled Cybersecurity and Ensuring World Trade. Tell us a little bit about that panel.
Yeah, well, we'll be taking a look at what are an increasing set of threats from not just the world of cybersecurity, from the advances that hackers have made and truly understanding how to disrupt digital supply chains, software supply chains, to insert their attacks into spaces that we would never have expected them to attack, but also in the use of generative AI to create new forms of malware, new forms of disinformation attacks, all of which threaten, all sorts of different pockets of society, but in particular global trade.
How fragile do you think the notion of a global cybersecurity is? Or perhaps another way to put it is, how vulnerable is the world to a cataclysmic cyber event?
I mean, it's trite to say this, but the world is incredibly interconnected these days, and they're interconnected through networks that run on top of a lot of open technologies, open standards, open source software in many cases. In fact, and we see this from the Linux Foundation, studies have shown behind every website, inside every device, 70 to 90% of what's inside that is pre-existing open source code. And we saw a major disruption about 2 years ago from a bug in a tiny little package nobody had ever heard of called Log4j that caused disruptions worldwide just during the holiday season as teams scrambled to patch their systems and people really didn't even understand how much impact there had been on their own businesses or where the software was even installed. That drove a tremendous response from no less than the National Security Council at the White House, who said, we've got to understand how software supply chains work. It fed a tremendous number of hack campaigns out there that we're still unwinding ourselves from. A lot of data was lost, a lot of passwords compromised. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is basically industry gearing up, not just the big tech sector, but and the financial services sector, but even increasingly trade and the kind of big iron kinds of companies, automotives, those sorts of things, and realizing that they need to take security a bit more seriously. But we still need, I think, the insurance industry to start to say, as a risk management practice, you really need to look at how do you get to security by design, secure software development by design, secure deployment by design. How do we get the upgrade cycles to be tighter and tighter? And really, what are the modern tools for measuring risk across the technology used to support these global supply chains? And how do we get more and better at implementing these different approaches?
So gearing up, then what in your mind would a cataclysmic cyber event look like?
Yeah, well, imagine what would happen if, the cell phone networks went down across an entire country or across an entire, region engaged in trade. Imagine if one could not trust whether the automotive software running inside of a set of vehicles wasn't going to suddenly, cause every steering wheel to surge left at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, right? Imagine what would happen if government facilities were brought down to the point where, or banking or payment networks were brought down. These are critical infrastructure now. In fact, in the United States, they launched something called CISA, the Critical Infrastructure Security Association, as a major agency under the White House, specifically to look at things like electrical grids, to look at healthcare systems, to look at different key industries and the software running inside those. And then governments around the world are also doing similar things. They're looking at how do we take this a little bit more seriously, but there's a set of carrots and there's a set of sticks, right? That government has, which are somewhat limited sometimes, especially in a global setting. And what we are saying is the insurance industry start to recognize the need to even just measure this and understand this, to understand how to get out of correlated risks in this domain as well. But those are some of the scenarios, and I tend not to dwell too much on like the darkest scenarios, mainly because I want to try to focus on this broad-based risk, this kind of almost annoyance that we have of the constant churn of attacks and mitigations and the like that we have to undertake, which also the insurance industry can help bend these industries towards some better outcomes, I believe.
Brian, do you envision these dark scenarios, as you call them, a possibility, or dare I even say, a likelihood?
They're all too likely, all too possible. We must mobilize to prevent them. We must understand how to even measure if we're on a course to one of those things happening. Measure what is the risk. I go back to this Log4j instance. People took it for granted. It got incorporated into products. It had been around for 20 years and slowly updated here and there, but everyone just kind of said this is something that just runs and we'll just fly with it. What they didn't stop to do is think about, and this is the platform providers, this is the vendors to major companies. How do we measure that risk? How much risk is there in that one component having a bug, right? Has it been audited recently? How frequently is it getting updated? So unless we get more serious about measuring those kinds of things, it's all too likely that we'll end up with any of those scenarios we put out. And frankly, a couple times a year, we do end up with these mad scrambles in the cybersecurity industry. The Log4j was just the most notable one, especially from a public policy point of view. But there's ones that happen, about once, twice a year, where it's really everybody's affected and everybody needs to upgrade.
So, what role does the insurance industry play in stopping or at least blunting such as an event as all the steering wheels turning left at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday?
Well, to continue the automotive metaphor, what we really lack in this domain are the seatbelts and safety inspections, and the kind of thing that the software industry, for better or worse, has kind of been governed by move fast and break things for much of its history, which has allowed tremendous innovation, allowed tremendous velocity in the development of new technologies, but has also left a lot of the risk mitigation up to the end users, who are often not in a position to do that. And there's increasingly a need for even enterprises on their own to be able to measure and understand the risk of the software that they're using. Tools that can provide objective data to know when something's been outdated, something is likely to have a bug in it. And these are tools that the insurance industry could deploy to bend the behaviors of the participants in the market towards better outcomes. To say, hey, if you are running this set of auditing tools and you've scanned not only the free stuff you get and the commercial stuff you get, but the stuff you've built in-house with these tools, then your premium is half as much as if you didn't run it otherwise, right? Those are incredibly powerful tools, and those, we've seen that be a successful approach in other regulated industries towards bending us towards lower risk outcomes, and I think that's very, very much needed in software.
Taking it a step further, Brian, how, in your opinion, should the insurance industry be viewing and/or approaching cyber threats and cyber liability coverage?
We do tend to be attracted to the big breaches or the big malware attacks. We tend to think about nation state actors, but there's this low-lying buzz of activity when it comes to just the day-to-day chop wood, carry water of improving cybersecurity by enterprises. Keeping your systems up to date, taking a secure by design approach as you're writing code. All these things that are not as fancy or as headline grabbing perhaps as some of the other major breaches, but there's a lot of low-hanging fruit down here, and I think there's tremendous leverage also that can come from collective action around funding better security in these open systems, in the open standards, in the open protocols, open source software. You fix it once in something like Log4j, and everyone benefits. And that's an incredible tool for those who think about risk management at a societal scale, at a global scale, to be able to use to improve everyone's collective cybersecurity.
Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
That was Brian Behlendorf, Chief Strategist for AI and Cyber for the Linux Foundation, and I'm John Weber for AM Best TV.